According to the World Bank, over the last decade, a greater share of the global population gained access to electricity than ever before. But in sub-Saharan Africa, the number of people without electricity increased. Now, this gap has been linked to slow economic growth plans in the region. But one of the key targets that governments continue to miss as a result is youth employment within distributed renewable energy sectors. On the backdrop of global campaigns, governments are called to prioritize policies and financing that will scale up access to renewable energy on the continent. Well, earlier today, the CEO at Power for All, Christina Skierka, moderated a panel discussion on energy empowering employment at the COP26 Climate Summit. She now joins us from Glasgow in Scotland. Great to have you with us today, Christina. Now, certainly decentralized power generation using renewables, that is considered pretty crucial for Africa going forward. And that's because of its potential to address Africa's energy supply gap sustainably and also cost effectively. So these off-grid renewable energy projects, they're expected to create over 4 million direct jobs by 2030 globally. That's according to Power for All data. What's your expectation then for Africa specifically?
Yeah, well, and thanks for having me. It's great to be discussing this with you today. It's a hot topic for everybody. And, I just want to set the stage a little bit about energy poverty. So globally, there's around a billion people, just under a billion people who have absolutely no access to energy, and another billion or so who have intermittent access. And both of those are unacceptable. And specific to the continent, there's around 600 million people that don't have any access to energy. So the report that we have published in the past and some of the data that we were discussing today on the panel included actually something recently published by the Rockefeller Foundation that predicts that there will be 25 million direct decentralized renewable energy jobs by 2030 and about 4.25 million for sub-Saharan Africa. Power for All is doing a companion piece to that modeling work where we actually do a ground up survey. So we talk to the companies themselves, looking at 5 countries, 4 of which are in sub-Saharan Africa, to really understand, what is making up their workforce, what are their workforce needs, and what are the kinds of jobs that are available. The early indications, though, actually is great news. It's showing what we sort of already knew about decentralized renewables, which is this is a form of energy that's resilient to COVID and other disruptions, which could indicate also some very fast growth in jobs for years to come. And we're actually expecting jobs in this sector likely to be higher than they were in pre-pandemic levels as soon as next year.
Well, you also say in that Power for All report, in most developing nations, you found that even though access to decentralized power sources was improving, domestic supply chain capacities, that's still a major obstacle to job creation and, of course, the development of the overall sector. Can you tell us how so?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this report we're talking about, you can find on our website, powerforall.org, and it's called Powering Jobs, the 2019 census. So among the things that we look at are what are spillover effects or indirect or induced jobs created by this entire sector known as decentralized renewables. And there's an incredible growth of jobs connected to siting where we might put a mini grid or, different operators, sales, et cetera. But when it comes to supply chains, nothing was left unscathed by COVID. In particular with the DRE sector, while a number of countries are starting to examine local production of decentralized renewables, including Ethiopia and Nigeria and Kenya, still most of these products are sourced overseas. And so it's oftentimes, up to a 3-month time lag, getting things produced overseas, getting them shipped, and then into people's hands and lighting up people's lives. Another example I think that's maybe more relatable is the impact on the agriculture sector. So obviously most countries, especially in East Africa, but throughout the continent, the vast majority of jobs are in the agricultural sector. And while that's great, and we can see the beginnings of change with access to energy, such as more productive milling, because that entire supply chain isn't set up with access to energy, we see all kinds of food spoilage. And so in that example, without, say, cold storage, you're losing out on the jobs that come from people who then resell the produce, or then, work with it at restaurants to create, great meals for people. So that's just an example that I think is quite relatable. And in particular, cold chain and the use of DRE in the agricultural supply sector is really important.
Well, as we also discuss African governments' climate goals at this year's COP26, what are your thoughts on the readiness of Africa's regulatory and, of course, business environment as well to support the sector? That's when we talk about decentralized power generation in renewables and certainly create that environment needed for job creation.
Yeah, so we actually did a study a few years back looking at the readiness of various countries to really embrace what decentralized renewable energy can do, not just in terms of driving access, but also in terms of the kind of jobs and ecosystem that it creates. And what we found is that out of 50 or so low energy access countries, so that's countries with 50% or less the population with regular access, there was a real mix. There were some countries that were light years ahead of others, already had in place some of the core pieces to make for a successful sector. And that includes having decentralized renewable energy carve-outs and energy plans. That means having energy access targets and also creating an empowered and well-funded rural electrification agency. But I will say that every country is different, and there's been a lot of advancement since then. And in our own experience, for example, working quite closely with the government of Uganda on a project we call Utilities 2.0, the idea here was to work with the decentralized sector to create a sort of grid-ready, meaningful load that could eventually connect and therefore help the government and local utility achieve their energy access targets. But in fact, what we ran into is, in addition to stakeholder engagement, we had to spend probably half of our time over the last couple of years working on permits and approvals and admin paperwork. So I think it's an example of a country that's really done right here is Rwanda, where they have a sort of a one-stop shop for the sector where you can come set up your business and really quickly speed through the process to get that energy into people's lives.
Well, we do have to leave it there, Christina. Many thanks for those great insights today. That, of course, is Christina Skierka. She's a CEO at Power for All.